is that they've lost a lot of the margin for error. This team used to fuck around all the time and could shoot their way back into any game. Whatever. 20 points down, like whatever. They could score 10 or 15 in a couple minutes. Well, those days might be kind of done.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all no. You know what? We're going on hard. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. It's me, Daniel Hardee, the gold-plated king, along with Duby Dub Dubs and Patrick Murray, DNHQ's finest, your favorite blog boys in the world. And one thing that's been on our minds recently since last night is the Golden State Warriors, the defending champions, were eliminated in 6 games by the Los Angeles Lakers, led by LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and Austin Reeves. I don't know what's going on here. Guys, just real quick, start with you, Patrick. First thought watching that game as it went down the tubes. What was going through your mind?
They lost it in Game 6 in Sacramento when they didn't show up for that, and then had all timer from Steph in Game 7. But that they gave them that short turnaround. They lost Game 1, and then I think from there they were kind of battling from behind. And they did reasonably well, but the same things plagued them all season, right? Not being able to win on the road, not operating the clutch. Like there were 2 games they should have won in this series. Like Game 4 was an absolute killer. I was so sure they were going to pull that out, and when they didn't, it was like, oh well, this. When they went down 3-1, I was in the Slack chat. I was like, this is over. But I do feel, just casting my mind back to the summer, and we'll get onto the kind of future stuff. But I felt ominous about this season from the moment I saw the report that Draymond Green was kind of making noises about his contract. And then, then you have the punching incident. And then, the chemistry of the team was completely off. Like they've always been greater than the sum of their parts. And this season, this playoff run, they kind of started, they got better towards the end. And they went into the playoffs with a bit of momentum, but really they never felt like a Warriors championship team to me. And I was always hoping that there was going to be a switch that they just flicked and it would kick in, but they didn't. When they lost that Game 6 in Sacramento, it was like, well, this isn't the iteration we need, and there's something wrong. I think there's something wrong in the chemistry was the big thing for me, because individually Curry was amazing. Draymond Green was actually pretty good on the floor. Klay Thompson, we can kind of get to that, but certainly with those 2 playing, the window's still open, I think, but they've got to sort out whatever's going on in terms of chemistry and get the right pieces there. And it didn't make me think they're done, let me put it that way, but it made me think that this season was just, for whatever reason, it was never going to happen.
Gotcha. W, you?
I was almost falling asleep on the couch. It was a big day for me, but for a lot of reasons, like I wasn't surprised. I wasn't super on the edge of my seat or like biting my fingernails. Like Patrick is saying, I think anybody who watched the team really closely this year, it's not like this was a shocking loss, right? Like, Steph Curry fell and hurt his knee really bad in the playoffs, and like they barely made it, and then Draymond got suspended in the finals, and like, okay, you lose that game, a couple of bounces go the wrong way, and it's like, oh damn, that was so close. And then against the Raptors, like everybody gets catastrophically injured. Like, what are you gonna do? This year, though, it was, and I did still think they could do it. I just didn't think it was likely that they would do it. And I think one of the themes this year is that they've lost a lot of the margin for error. This team used to fuck around all the time and could shoot their way back into any game. Whatever. 20 points down, like whatever. They could score 10 or 15 in a couple minutes. Well, those days might be kind of done. And I think that there's a growing reality here as far as the sort of system design elements. If you're going to be this top loaded with your roster, you're just have to fill it up with a bunch of young rookie cheap contracts. Like the vet minimum, even those are too expensive for these guys. So you're going to have a bunch of rookies. And it's like, and this is the whole 2 timelines thing. And this is why it's so popular to talk about on the internet and why people hate talking about it so much. It's like, it's got to exist. And like, it's a clear problem. So I do think that it does set up some truths for the team to think about moving into next year as far as what worked and what didn't work. But I find myself not especially sad today, Daniel.
I hear you. I definitely have been thinking about the way it went down. This whole year for me was a referendum on the greatness of the core and how even the SAC series. I mean, we were a 6 seed, we was a 3 seed, and we beat them. And a lot of people kind of take that for granted, but it's not very often that a 6 seed beats a 3 seed, and especially a 3 seed as decorated as the Kings were, with a coach who knew everything we were doing and all players' weaknesses. Like that took so much out of this team, as Patrick referenced to. Um, but if you look at those games, like there was a couple tight ones, of course, but then the Warriors also blew the Kings out. You know, against the Lakers, we won 2 games, blew the Lakers out both games. So you can see that there's so much of that dynastic Warriors still embedded. I mean, they're the reigning champions. And it was clear that the other teams were concerned that, amen, the Warriors is going to run and blow you out. But that's where the consistency we were missing all year. And I think we chalked it up to things we've seen before, championship boredom, injuries, Wiggins disappeared, take care of his family, young players getting put into roles that they were craving for and figuring that out. And I felt that the whole time we were doing this, I didn't like the Wiseman trade, even though I love Gary Payton II. But I thought the whole point of doing what we were doing was to get the youth and athleticism to buoy the team going forward so he wouldn't be as dependent on the shooting. Now, of course, you have the greatest shooters of all time, and Jordan Poole, who last year was a phenom shooting the basketball. The shooting wasn't that great this year as far as the playoffs run goes. I have a couple of numbers here I just want to give to the Dub Nation to think about. Steph Curry averaged 30.5 points per game in this playoff run. That's the most he's ever averaged in a playoff run. Like, this was like peak Steph. That's crazy to say at this point of his career. 30 points per game in the playoffs, and people have been seeing him do this for like over a decade. That's insane, right? He shot 46% from the field. That's his second highest ever. So when you got a GOAT caliber player still getting buckets like he's, MJ in his second run with the Bulls, like you feel pretty good about that. And that's where you go to your other shooters. Yeah, Klay Thompson, arguably the second greatest shooter of all time, shot 38% from the field, which is the worst of his postseason career. And he shot 37% from three-point range. That's the second worst of his career, all playoff numbers here. So if your splash bro is shooting 38% from the field, like that's really hard to come back from, especially with the style the Warriors play, where they're going to keep giving Klay the ball to keep shooting. And then you go to Jordan Poole. Now, this was the guy, honestly, I felt like, even if Klay is off, I mean, we saw last year, Klay wasn't even playing some of the games. Jordan Poole was the X factor last year. Last year, he shot 50% from the field, 39% from downtown, averaged 17 points per game in that playoff run. That's a guy coming off the bench, he can start, who's coming in and creating problems, getting to the basket, getting to the mid-range, shooting that deep shot, to the point that it was like, we can't guard everybody. We just can't guard everybody. And, the other teams collapse. And we win a championship that way. This year, 10 points per game, he shot 34% from the field, 25% from downtown. So if the team is predicated on the Warriors playing small, playing fast, and using shooters to spread the floor, and only one guy on the team can shoot, you're in trouble. So I guess that brings in the question the idea of what happened to the other guys, the Wisemans, the Kumingas, who are supposed to come in and bring the brute force, the athleticism, the jumping, and all that stuff to not have us rely so much on three-pointer.
Well, they've said, and we have all said, I've personally said, this team will only go as far as the team can take them. Must win. Game 6, Klay shot 3 of 19. Like the math just isn't there. And sure, it would be sweet if Kuminga or Poole, Poole's a whole nother conversation. But Draymond Green went from like being the offensive driving force, like a real factor, to like can't really do much. And like it was game 6 must win. Like the fact that 2 of the 3 of the core who are going to take us as far as we go, like that's what that looks like when they have a bad game when it matters.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Klay, I mean, so what you're talking about is like the second scoring option, really, because Green, like he can bring some force, but it's not going to be every game on offense, certainly. So, what I'm always looking at with him is he got the energy? Is he playing aggressively? Is he, defensively everywhere? And what's interesting to me is I've always thought that this window basically lasts as long as Draymond Green is capable of like carrying the defense and bringing that energy and bringing that force, because Curry kind of he's older, but he's clearly aging better, as he says, right at the peak of his powers. And Green is kind of a little bit spotty, but still, I think, it's probably got a couple of years of being able to do that more times than not. And across the 7-game series, that's probably enough. And if you think back to the finals, he had a bad couple of games, but then game 5 and game 6, he was great and helped drive those wins. And again, in this series against the Lakers, a couple of really good games, really aggressive games, and they won. I think Klay is, where we're, as you say, Jordan Poole's a slightly different conversation, I think, but Klay, I think I found myself really quite frustrated with Klay quite a lot this year. So, I mean, totally understandably, he didn't, he came into training camp and said he hadn't played at all in the summer because he was worried about getting injured again. Like, everyone's going to kind of understand that. But then his answer to that was to like really press. So if you remember the first couple of months of the season, he was just chucking and like anything you could possibly, like the ball. It was like, and in his mind, he was saying, this is how I'm great. This is how I'm great. And it was never how he's great. Like those explosive games happened when he was like playing off the ball, taking controlled shots. And then he got hot, and then he might chuck a few heaters and they go, that was Klay then. And I think he's got to settle. They've got to find a way to settle him down a bit, and they did that. I think in the middle part of the season, he was much better. When they got to the playoffs again, and the pressure was on, he kind of reverted to that. And there was a comment. He said something like, someone was asking why you shooting so many threes. Well, they shot the most threes they've ever shot in a game in the playoffs, but literally they never won by shooting that many threes. There was always a balance to their attack. And it's like, well, we won 4 titles like that. Actually, no, you didn't. The only team that shot 50 threes in a game against you was the Houston Rockets. And you know what happened? They lost to you. They missed 27 in a row and they went out. So like, there's something there that is like, they've got to rediscover, like getting Klay to play in a role that suits him where he is in his career. Now he can still shoot a reasonable percentage of threes. It's the inside the arc that's the problem, the finishing inside the arc. I also think, like, why is he dribbling so much? Like, this is a guy who scored 60 on 11 dribbles, and all of that, but like in all these games, he was like he was handling the ball, he was dribbling into fadeaway shots and all this stuff. But no, that's not your game. Like if you want to be effective, play like the kind of offensive role. And then I think there's also, honestly, just the minutes load. Like he is getting huge minutes for this team because they felt they didn't have anyone else. He can defensively, so kind of, which is where we come to the second thing. But defensively, he's still certainly gunning bigger players. He wasn't actually that bad, but I do think there's probably some fatigue and tired legs. The guy's 33. He's come off 2 major injuries. It's like recovery time, particularly this series, game every other day. You had that first series go long, So I think with Klay, like I still feel like the second half of the season showed that there's a Klay in there that can play winning basketball and be part of this team. Maybe not worth $43 million, but that's only 1 year left on that contract.